Hello again, students. Thank you for coming out and for watching the lecture video. This is going to be the video for the first week's lecture. You may have already seen the course introduction video. I meant that as sort of a summary of what's going to happen for the whole class. But I want to encourage you to keep track of everything that's in the content for each week, and to do that as thoroughly as possible. And do let me know, reach out if there's just too much in there. But I have a feeling that you all can make it through, especially with the lighter loads over the summer. All right, so for this week, we wanted to sort of open up the course and welcome and sort of share everybody's passion, vision for veteran studies. Um, my personal passion here is that I am a veteran of 1st Special Forces Group in the Army. I served from 2001 to 2005. Um, and when I got out of the military, I found myself homeless. I found myself getting a divorce. I found myself just unable to really cope with society in any meaningful way. Part of that I blame on transition services that were basically non-existent, and part of that I blame on sort of a lack of mentorship that I had from my parents. My parents were separated, so it's not surprising that I found it a struggle anyway. In the first place, I joined when I was 18, uh, immediately after the events of 9/11, um, and it was just it became a very formative experience for me. But because it was a formative experience, I didn't have any kind of transitional assistance. Um, I also found that my way of speaking was different from civilians when I got out. I had a new grammar, I had a new set of colloquialisms, I had a just a different manner of speaking, even impregnating my dialect with silence was actually a dialect feature of the military dialect. So, um, as we embark on this class, I want to share that experience with you, but also sort of what I've done since then. Um, I got my bachelor's and master's in theater, and then I pursued a PhD in rhetoric, writing, and culture. Um, my PhD focused on sociolinguistics with a emphasis on veteran dialect. And what I discovered was that when veterans attempt to tell their stories, there's about 10% of the words that they use that civilians don't really have any context for. Um, so it represents a significant barrier. Um, and that dialect that they come back into the civilian world with has a very, very long staying power. One of the subjects that I interviewed for my dissertation um, had received electroshock therapy and lost a whole lot of memories after Vietnam. Uh, and the thing that he didn't lose was his knowledge of these specific military terms that refer to specific things. Um, and so, as I studied that more and more, I discovered that there is this linguistic barrier between military and civilians. Um, and there are a whole number of things that we'll explore along the way that lead to that divide. But there is certainly a large divide that emerges between veterans and civilians, even after a very small tour in any of the services. Um, the roadmap for the course is really built into those course modules. They will guide you through. If you are having some difficulty, please get in touch with me. I want you to share everything that you can with your classmates. Make sure that they are getting everything they can from your participation. Um, this is a very quick online asynchronous course, and so it's difficult to get something out of the other students. But if you participate in those discussion forums, um, they do tend to be very helpful in developing some camaraderie with your fellow students. Um, I'm not trying to make this course hard for you, but I want to make sure that everybody is coming away with a good understanding of veterans and how to write about them. So that's sort of what we're working toward. Um, Veteran voices could be defined in a lot of different ways. Um, you could be talking about personal testimonies like with StoryCorps. You could be talking about creative works like public art and masks and painting and horse therapy and all kinds of different things like that. You could be talking about public histories, things like the monuments that a lot of cities put up to honor their World War II veterans. Um, you could be talking about informal narratives like stories that we would tell, programs like Warrior Writers and Warrior Words, and um, all of these different things that seek to uncover the ways in which veterans can express their stories. Um, so, my working definition for the purposes of this class is going to be that a veteran's voice is, and here's my drum roll, right? A veteran's voice is uh, a purposeful narrative or expression put forth by a veteran in order to communicate something about their veteran identity or their hybrid identity that includes veterandom. All right. So I'll let you pause or do whatever you got to do. But that's going to be my working definition. It's very broad on purpose. And that is because there is a variety of things that we consider veterans' voices. The big thing that is important is that it's coming from a veteran. Um, there are lots of stories that are really good that don't come from veterans. Thinking about things like Saving Private Ryan, right? Very good movie, extremely realistic. They had veterans working on it, but the story is not coming from a veteran, right? So I wouldn't consider that veterans' voices. I would say that they were very conscientious in how they presented that, but they um, bought into the sort of mythology. And the mythology is what is entertaining. So I understand why they did it because it made a good movie. But alternatively, you think about something like our textbook Tribe, um, in which Sebastian Junger is sort of making sense of his service and trying to cast some kind of net backward to catch people up, right? So that's the sort of difference between a veteran narrative or a veteran voice and a voice that's outside of veterans speaking into veterans or speaking about veterans. There are lots of voices in our society that speak about veterans with or without their consent. And I want you to understand the difference because you'll start to see, right, when civilians talk about veterans, they put them up on a plinth. They say, thank you for your service. They say, oh, I could never do what you do. They say, oh, it must have been so crazy over there, or, something along those lines that distances them from your experience or your lived life. And that makes it an isolating experience for a veteran when you do that. Um, it doesn't start any conversations, it mostly ends them, right? Thank you for your service is the end of a conversation, not the beginning, right? So when somebody says that to me, of course, I try to be polite, right? I say something like, thank you for your support, or something like that. But it's a two-sentence exchange, and it doesn't lead to anything deeper. Rather, we should think about how to start conversations rather than ending them, right? Because those are when we'll get things like first person accounts. We'll get them to show how their voice shapes our new understanding as we go along. We get stories that are often comical, often tragic, often all kinds of rich history that you never get if you end every conversation before it begins by saying thank you for your service, right? So uh, as we uncover veterans' voices, I want you to be looking for places where you can find veteran voices, right? Certainly in books by veterans. There are several publishers who specialize in books by veterans. Um, Middle West Press, Blue Ear Books. Those are a couple that really specialize in getting veteran work out there. Um, and those are the ones that are sort of the harbingers for veteran voices. Of course, the big publishers also have some veteran books, but they consider it sort of a special interest. Whereas the people who focus on veteran works are specifically trying to uncover the work from these veterans who aren't professional writers. Um, so as we read these things and we get more familiar, we should be able to discern, okay, is this an authentic veteran voice? Is this somebody that's pushing a veteran narrative? Is it something else? Uh, it's really I want you to understand, certainly by the end of the class, the difference between when somebody else speaks for you and when you speak for yourself, because veterans have a lot of people speaking for them. And often, because the veteran dialect is impregnated with this silence, they don't speak very much for themselves. That's why all of these programs that we use to collect veteran voices are really essential to bringing these narratives, these expressions to the core, to the fore. All right. Um, There are also what you'll see out there, sort of these official military histories. These cover things like, the generals or the flag officers that do these actions. You've heard of Rommel and Patton and Lee and, Sherman and Grant and all of these generals who lead men. And certainly they are veterans. Yeah. But as we go along, we're going to find value in the story of veterans who are not necessarily professional soldiers, people who serve for a contract, 4 years, 8 years, 10 years, 12 years, whatever it is, people who serve for a time, but that's not their career ever after, right? Those are the people that we're trying to recover and bring into our conversations. The generals can take classes in stuff. They don't have to um, hang out in the mud all day long, right? They can go to a college, they can go to a school, they can send themselves to a school if they can justify it, right? Um, a private, even up to a sergeant, and my experience is the Army, so I will often default to Army. But these lower ranks, even the lower NCOs, can't send themselves somewhere. They can ask to go to a place, but if there isn't a slot, or if even if their commander doesn't have a lot of pull with that particular base, maybe he made a bad decision there or she made a bad decision there, um, then that can result in that soldier being denied a lot of the things that they would like to do. So really, we're looking for those authentic voices that are not the people who make a career out of the military necessarily, but more the people who uh, succeed for a time or serve for a time, and then try to transition back to civilian life. I'm not saying that it's an easier transition after 20 or 30 years. In many ways, that makes it a lot harder. But after 20 or 30 years in the military, a person has found a new way of living. And often they don't try to transition back. They just live that way in the civilian world. Um, so we'll begin to talk about the difference of those things, and we'll see those as we go along. They are all veteran voices, um, but we're going to be focused on sort of those short-term um, short-term commitments, short-term veterans um, who make an extraordinary sacrifice. Um, you'll often hear veterans talk about, well, I wrote a blank check to the government up to and including my life. If you don't know about checks, that's a blank check is like spend whatever you want up to and including my life. Um, and that sort of commitment, that sort of, you know what, I'll go send me mentality. That's really what makes veterans significant in our history, is that they have chosen to make that sacrifice. And so, as we use them as our subject matter in this upper division writing course, I would really appreciate a degree of respect, of reverence for the subject matter. But again, that does not mean place them on a plinth that is untouchable. Rather, because we respect them and because we revere them, we want to reincorporate them into our culture, into our society, into our community. And that is how we can thank them for their service. All right. We're also going to be looking at the historical significance of veterans in each major conflict that the United States has undergone. Um, so we will talk, we're going to talk primarily about World War I forward when we're talking about veterans in this course. Um, Certainly the Civil War, the War of 1812, the American Revolution, the French and Indian War, those are certainly things that are important to know about. But as we're talking about things in this course, we are going to be focused on World War I to the present, because we do want to focus on more contemporary veterans. Um, so thinking about World War I to the present. Um, World War I was the first of the mechanized conflicts, essentially. So, between the Civil War in the mid 19th century, so 18 mid mid 18s, you're experiencing things like a repeating rifle for the first time. You're experiencing the Gatling gun. You're experiencing regular horse cavalry. Um, but when we get to World War One, we begin to see the effects of the Industrial Revolution on warfare. So machine guns become more prevalent on the battlefield. It's the last conflict that we see the major involvement of horse cavalry. Um, it's we're beginning to see artillery pieces, things like howitzers and cannons that fire much farther than what you traditionally think of as a cannon. Um, and with these, we have the emergence of a term called shell shock. Um, and shell shock evolves over time as we talk about the different conflicts. But really, we would understand it today as PTSD or PTS. Um, so it's really something that we struggle with reintegrating these veterans because of shell shock. Um, and that's the reason that we have a lot of the veterans benefits that we have today is because veterans from World War I came back and they were supposed to get these bonuses, they were supposed to get these benefits, they were supposed to get their jobs back, and they didn't. And so that led to a lot of big problems between World War I and World War II because these veterans who were coming back after honorably serving um, were in rough shape and they did not get the support or just the respect that they were due for having served their countries. After World War I, we have things like veteran political movements that push for veterans benefits. We have things that veterans engage in. We have laws that are passed, and we'll hear more about these as we go along. But um, the World War I veterans really come back and they push for uh, their rights, their privileges, their uh, benefits, and that is really important because the next conflict that comes along is World War II, in which the sons and daughters of those World War I veterans are the ones fighting. Um, and you'll often hear World War II veterans called the greatest generation because of the way in which World War II was fought. Um, so as we go into our exploration of World War II, we'll think about things like the Bataan Death March, and we'll think about things like Victory in Europe and Victory in Japan and the Battle of Saipan and Midway and Pearl Harbor and all of these different battles that live really large in our memories and really give us a lot of what our conception is of veterans today. Um, After World War II, we had the Korean conflict, which wasn't a war, right? And that one is currently not over yet, right? So the demilitarized zone between North and South Korea was the sort of end line of the Korean conflict. Um, and this is the first generation of veterans. We had World War I and World War II, where veterans were pretty much revered and respected. The Korean conflict veterans come back, and because there was no declaration of war really, they start to catch a lot of pushback from the community. There's peace protests, there's anti-war stuff, there's all kinds of things that happen to these veterans. And along with them, we have the Vietnam conflict, which comes during right the problems in Korea. Um, and part of this is left over from World War II because during World War II, Japan invades Korea and Manchuria, and really get they get pieces of Korea, and it's just a big mess. And so we're trying to resolve some of those things in Korea and Vietnam, and we just make a big mess of it. Um, and so we really get the veterans from Vietnam and Korea not getting much at all in the way of the benefits that they expect when they go and fight. It's also Vietnam is the last conflict in which we have the draft because of the pushback that we had. Certain people were able to assert their privilege in order to avoid being drafted, and that was not a unifying experience for the population because if I was a senator's son, right, I wasn't going to get drafted. I would instead, go to college or go abroad or do all of these different things. And so you find in Korea and Vietnam, the veterans coming back are it's especially difficult for them to transition back to civilian life because they see a lot of civilians as hostile to them as they return. Um, and we'll talk about some of those things along the way. I do want to say that this is not a history course, right? So we're going to be learning about some of these things as a sort of flyby, but they're not necessarily going to be the subject of our learning. Rather, they're going to be the topics that we can latch onto to write about um, in some ways. Um, and then also after Vietnam. We have all kinds of shall we call them covert actions in South America, where we're dealing with um, dictators and drug cartels and all kinds of things, and we make some questionable decisions and we evolve, and that's all part of the Cold War. We're scared of communism, and we're um, seeing communists behind every person who disagrees with capitalism, and it gets to be just a mess of ideas that culminates in wars in Kosovo and wars in Mozambique and wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, the Philippines, um, and we end up in what Dick Cheney calls a quagmire, right? Because of our irresponsible practices um, in using our military force around the globe. So uh, I don't want to go too much into detail on all the dates and all the times and everything, but just know that there's a huge background that surrounds veterans, especially of the modern era, the what we call GWAT veterans, so veterans of Operation Iraqi Freedom and Operation Enduring Freedom that were in Iraq and Afghanistan. That's my generation of veterans. And they've got all of this baggage that comes with them, both from the side of the World War I and World War II veterans, who were largely revered and continue to be to this day, and the Korean conflict and Vietnam conflict veterans, um, which the community really was slow to appreciate. We'll say that. Um, so there's a whole bunch of social and cultural context that informs how we treat our current generation of veterans, um, and it's really as you dig in further, you'll find some really interesting bits along the way. Um, Creative expressions. I want to talk a little bit about some of the creative expressions that veterans use, and I want to do some reading out of the Warrior Writers book. Um, I assigned an excerpt from Warrior Writers for you this week, and I'm actually going to read a little bit out of 14 to 22 in Warrior Writers this week. And I want to just do that because it's important for you to hear sort of what that poetic voice sounds like uh, from a veteran, right? It's compounded because this is by a veteran, read by a veteran. So actually, I'm gonna go away from the forward. I'm gonna go to page 46 and 47, A Day Like Any Other. This is a poem by John Grote. I came to work, a day not unlike any other. Beautiful September morning. Sky is crisp, crystal blue. The excitement of the Pentagon soldiers doing what the soldiers do. Actions and decisions being worked, meetings to attend. Another day of our army at peace. A day like any other, but then it wasn't. A plane hits the Trade Center. Once is an accident. Twice? I don't think so. Heightened awareness, but life goes on. Phone calls continue with, "Did you hear?" And then it all changed. Floors roiling from explosive impact, flashes of flame, smoke curling down the hall, klaxon-like alarms, directions to evacuate. Grab your bag and go. But wait, fight or flight? Time to fight. This is my building. These are my people. Time to help. What can be done have never been here before. A day unlike any other. Into the inferno and back again and again and again. What would you want if you were the one trapped, suffocating? Time to step up and act. Smoke so thick the taste never leaves, gagging for gasps of clean air. Smells of burning jet fuel and human flesh permeate the day. Shock on the face of seasoned warriors. How did this happen? Cries for help from everywhere. Pools of calm within a vortex of confusion. Is this real? Never had a day like this before, nor since a day like no other. So obviously that's about 9/11. The speaker is in the Pentagon and is giving us sort of the play-by-play of how his day started and how it ended. Um, it started sort of mundane, which you'll hear that in a lot of veteran narratives, where they start with something mundane, they give you a stasis up front. Um, and then as you continue on, that's when the stasis is interrupted by something ridiculous, something that's really hard to fathom as you go along, right? It's something that any normal person would respond to with shock. And veterans routinely act as the speaker in that poem did. They run back into the fire. They say, hey, hang on, wait a second. This is fight or flight, and I'm going to fight. So in that poetic voice, we get not only a firsthand account of what it was like when the Pentagon was struck by the plane on 9/11, but also we get an understanding of the smell, the sound, of the taste, of the irritation in the back of your throat. It's really important to read these kinds of things, especially if you want to understand on a deeper level um, what goes on in conflict, um, and who our subjects are as we work with veterans. Um, in Tribe, Chapter 1, The Men and the Dogs, Sebastian Junger is talking about the symbolism of how dogs protect us, right? Um, in He's going into a lot of detail about how veterans sort of stand in the gap and how they protect society. And how societies are best when they think about how to protect all of their members. Um, Dogs are patient, they are loyal. Um, we, when we attempt to emulate them, we end up at the best traits of humanity. And so, as Junger is talking about veterans and sort of relating them through metaphor to uh, dogs or people who guard the outside perimeter, or people who make life easier for their tribe. Um, he's talking about again like the emperor penguins who stand on the outside of the circle and absorb the wind for a few days. And then they're pushed back into the middle of the circle and somebody else stands out there. Or you'll see somebody talk about the sheepdog metaphor, where there are sheep and there are sheepdogs. And sheepdogs are always on the outside, protect the sheep from wolves, right? I don't want to be reductive about the civilian population. The civilian population does a lot to help themselves, but I do want to uh, sort of relate how veterans are coming to or feeling about the sacrifices that they're making. Often they don't view it as significantly as those people who are looking in view it. Um, so keep that in mind as you approach chapter 1 of Tribe. Um, Old Soldier meets Young Soldier this week. That's a very interesting video that I hope you'll take in and pause every once in a while. Watch like the first 3 minutes and pause at any of the emotional beats that you see. Um, when I was working on Warrior Riders, I had a discussion across uh, generations of veterans going on. I had a World War II veteran. Uh, I had a few Vietnam veterans. I had a Gulf War veteran, and I was a GWOT veteran. And um, just the respect that goes back and forth across those generational lines is something that we could really stand to pick up on as a society and do more of as we're relating with one another. So I want you to pay attention to uh, those times when the emotion of the moment between the old soldier and the young soldier overwhelm them and what's going on in that moment. And I want you to talk about or think about uh, how it, why is it important that it's a conversation between two veterans without the intervention of some kind of mediator or some kind of interviewer? Why is that important that it's just the two of them talking? All right. Um, we can't do a lot of interactive activity in this course because we're online asynchronous. But I do want you to be actively breaking down things and reading closely and analyzing things. I would much rather you read some of the reading or watch some of the video than watch none of it. Don't not read something or don't not watch something because it's long. Read or watch as much as you can and take away what you can. Again, as the other video says, right? I want you by the end of this course to have read 200 pages you've never read before and read and write 20 original pages of your own work. If you do that, you will find that your writing skill will increase. As you're reading through the poems, I want you to pay attention to special things. Um, Identify the tone. Are they being sarcastic? Are they being comical? Are they being serious? Are they depressed? What is the tone of it? I want you to look for images that they paint. Um, so, like the poem that we just read, we got sort of a soundscape of what was going on. We had the klaxons and the jet fuel and the cries for help, and we got a really vivid soundscape of what was going on. So look for imagery that's painted. This can also be metaphorical imagery. Um, and look for how each poem contributes to an understanding of the veteran experience, right? We often don't think about the choice between fight or flight that the poem that we read talked about, right? It doesn't seem like something that would be uh, something that you would audibly choose to talk about, right? Rather, it seems like something, well, oh, well, the training just took over and I ran back into the building. No, it didn't. You made that decision, right? And you made that decision out of love for your coworkers, if we're talking about the writer of that poem. And I wonder how many of us would do that? And what does that tell us about veterans, about the veteran experience? I don't know, right? That's why I need you all to tell me, right? Um, so as you're going through the reading, as you're going through the viewing, pay special attention to those things. Specifically, again, tone, imagery. Um, and we'll get more in depth as we go along. Um, as we are approaching this subject matter, there are some ethical and trauma-informed concerns to go along with anybody we're interviewing or anybody we're talking to with regard to their experience as veterans. Um, for starters, consent, right? Um, I don't want you to ambush a veteran and ask them for a story, certainly. And I want to do not ever ask a veteran if they killed somebody. Do not do it. At the very worst, they're going to say yes, and they will be angry about it, and you may trigger something in them that will cause damage. At the very best, it's going to be kind of awkward. Don't do it. Don't be that person. All right? Do not ask a veteran if they've ever killed anybody. But consent means you can ask them questions like, hey, oh, you're a veteran? Hey, would you mind telling me something about your service? Or would you mind telling me about, like, what did you like about it? Like, what was your job? What did you do? Where did you go? Did you go anywhere crazy? Um, those kinds of things are just fine. But give them the opportunity to say, oh, I don't want to talk about it. You need to obtain consent. And it's not just no means no, it's yes means yes, right? We're all familiar with that now. So I want you to obtain consent for any veterans that you're working with. Um, and certainly if you're going to quote them in a paper, get their consent for that as well. Anonymity. If you are interviewing a veteran and they don't expressly say, I want you to put my name on this, I want you to give them a different name. All right. You'll notice in my dissertation, if you ever look that up, which it's perfectly, you can perfectly go and see it. It's in the North Dakota State University library, right? Um, you'll see that I gave each of my participants uh, a pseudonym, right? So just use a different name. It can mean something to you, that's fine. Just don't let it lead back to them in any way. If you are going to be talking about something that may trigger someone, things like MST, military sexual trauma, um, things like violence, things like graphic um, images, give them a trigger warning at the beginning. I'm not saying that you need to interrupt an artistic expression that is in the middle of something to say, hey, there's gore coming. You don't need to do that. But at the beginning of whatever venue, whatever expression you're giving, if there's going to be something that may trigger someone, just give a trigger warning at the beginning, right? Say, hey, this expression of mine features discussions of gore, right? It doesn't need to be anything farther than that. Just give people the opportunity to opt out if they desire to. And lastly, I want you to be inquiring humbly. There's a problem in young students where they learn a little bit about a little bit, and then they go out into the world and they decide that they have the answers to all the world. Often, when you encounter veterans and you work with veterans, you're going to find that they are skeptical of academics. They're skeptical of medical professionals. They're skeptical of social workers. This is because these people have used them time and again for their own agendas. And so you need to approach any inquiry that you do with regard to veterans with a humble nature. Don't approach them as if you have all the answers. You don't. You're not going to. You're just going to make them angry or worse, triggered, and it's just going to not result in very good work. Instead, approach them humbly. Be curious. Be interested. Be human. And work from a perspective that they have something to offer this world that other people just don't. All right. So as you're working on your work for this class, remember consent, anonymity, trigger warnings, and humble inquiry. All right. Do pay attention to the site. It's going to feature all of the assignments. We are going to focus on how we identify veterans' voices and what it means to have a veteran's voice. And then we're also going to talk about um, how these things really feed into the larger narrative surrounding veterans. So buckle up. It's going to be a very quick 5 weeks, but I think that you'll all have a lot of fun if you dig into this topic. And once more, thank you very much for being interested in veterans' voices at all. I sincerely hope that each of you goes on to help as many veterans as you can handle helping, because we need it. Um, it's very, very necessary. So thank you all for watching. Appreciate you. Keep working. I'm going to be working with you to try and get everything to be useful for you and to make sure that you get what you need to out of this course. All right. Good night.